I used to believe that life followed a clear logical path. If you worked hard, stayed loyal, and did the right thing, you'd be rewarded with stability and happiness. I wasn't expecting perfection. No marriage is without its flaws, but I thought what Helena and I had was strong. Now, looking back, I realized how blind I was. That evening, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting my tie, forcing myself to shake off the nagging exhaustion from another long week at work. The company's annual corporate party wasn't something I looked forward to, but it was part of the job. Smiling, networking, showing my face. Everything expected of someone in my position. Helena was already dressed and waiting by the door, scrolling through her phone. Her lips pressed into a thin line of impatience. "We're going to be late," she muttered, not looking up. She looked stunning, wearing a sleek black dress that hugged her figure perfectly. I had always admired how effortlessly elegant she was, but that night, something felt off. "You seem tense," I said as I grabbed my jacket. She finally glanced at me, her expression unreadable. "It's been a long day. Let's just go." It wasn't like her to be this distant. I should have pressed her on it, but I didn't. We arrived at the venue, a luxury hotel ballroom filled with soft jazz music, clinking glasses, and the hum of corporate small talk. The atmosphere was lively, but I felt out of place. As we stepped inside, Helena's entire demeanor changed. Her posture straightened, her eyes scanned the room with purpose, and then, just like that, she was gone. One moment she was by my side. The next, she had drifted into a sea of executives and their spouses, disappearing into the night like she belonged somewhere else. I tried to brush it off. I grabbed a drink, made polite conversation with colleagues, and laughed at the right moments, but a gnawing feeling in my gut told me something was wrong. That's when I saw her. She was across the room, standing close, too close to another man. First, I couldn't see his face. He was taller than most of the people around him, broad-shouldered, radiating the kind of confidence that came with power. When he turned slightly, recognition hit me like a punch to the chest. It was Miles Harrington, an executive at our firm, charismatic, wealthy, the kind of guy who never had to try too hard to get what he wanted. And right now, what he wanted was my wife. Helena was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. Her hand brushed against his arm as she laughed at something he said, her body language open, inviting. My grip tightened around my glass. I forced myself to stay rational. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was imagining things, overthinking the way she tilted her head, the way he leaned in just a little too much. But deep down, I knew better. I made my way toward them, my heart hammering against my ribs. When Helena saw me approaching, a flicker of something, guilt, panic, flashed across her face before she quickly masked it with a practiced smile. "Oh, Warren. I was just talking to Miles about the new marketing strategy." I turned to him. He didn't flinch, didn't look the least bit guilty. If anything, he seemed amused. "Nice to see you, Warren," he said smoothly, extending a hand. I shook it, my grip firm, my mind racing. "Likewise." Helena placed a hand on my arm a little too casually. "We were just catching up." Catching up. The phrase echoed in my mind, bouncing between denial and cold realization. I could have played along. I could have smiled, pretended like I didn't notice, convinced myself that I was being paranoid. But something about the way they looked at each other, the way she had completely forgotten my existence the moment she stepped into that room, made it impossible. "Catching up?" I repeated, my voice steady. "Then you won't mind if I join you?" Helena hesitated just for a second, but it was enough. Miles chuckled. "Of course not. The more the merrier." And just like that, I knew. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't paranoid. Something was happening right in front of me, and it was only the beginning. I stood there, forcing a smile, pretending I wasn't dissecting every movement, every subtle glance exchanged between them. Helena was good at keeping her emotions controlled. She always had been. But the moment of hesitation before she spoke again told me everything I needed to know. "We were just talking about upcoming projects," she said, her voice light, casual, too casual. "Miles has some interesting ideas for streamlining the marketing approach." Miles smirked, Swirling the whiskey in his glass like this was all a game to him. Maybe it was. I nodded, but my jaw tightened. Right? I'm sure it's fascinating. Helena shifted uncomfortably, her fingers wrapping around the stem of her champagne flute a little too tightly. I knew that look. She didn't want me here. That thought hit me harder than it should have. I was an outsider in my own marriage. Before I could say anything else, someone from the firm called miles over, giving him an easy escape. He clapped me on the shoulder like we were old friends and leaned toward Helena just a little too much as he said, "We'll catch up later." I watched him walk away, my pulse drumming in my ears. I turned back to Helena, my smile gone. "You seem pretty close to him," I said, keeping my voice even. She rolled her eyes, sipping her drink like my question was exhausting. "Warren, don't start." "I'm not starting anything. I'm asking a question." She exhaled sharply, tilting her head back like she was trying to summon patience. "He's my colleague. We work together. That's all." "That's all," I repeated, because from where I was standing, it looked like a little more than just work talk. She gave me a sharp look, her eyes narrowing. "You're being ridiculous." Maybe I was. Maybe I was just another jealous husband seeing ghosts where there weren't any. But deep down, I knew better. Before I could press further, someone grabbed Helena's arm, a coworker laughing, dragging her toward the dance floor. She let them pull her away without another glance in my direction, leaving me standing there alone, drowning in a gut-wrenching realization. I had already lost her. Not in the obvious way, not yet, but emotionally, she was already gone. I moved to the bar, needing something stronger than whatever polite cocktail I had been drinking. As I waited for my drink, I glanced across the room. Helena was dancing now, spinning under the warm golden lights, her laughter ringing out, carefree. She looked happy. More than that, she looked free. And I hated that it wasn't because of me. For years, I had done everything to be the man she needed. Supportive, stable, dependable. But standing there watching her, I realized something painful. I wasn't the man she wanted. I downed my drink in one swallow, the burn doing nothing to numb the ache settling in my chest. I didn't know how long I stood there, watching from the sidelines, invisible in my own life. The party swirled around me. Music, laughter, conversations I wasn't part of. Time stretched, and with it, the quiet sinking feeling that I was about to face a truth I wasn't ready for. And then I saw it. Helena slipping away from the dance floor, heading toward the hotel's balcony, and Miles following right behind her. I didn't hesitate. Glass in hand, heart hammering. I walked toward the balcony doors, my stomach twisting with the weight of everything I already knew but didn't want to admit. What I saw next shattered the last piece of denial I had left. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. You can only decide what to do next. The air outside was crisp, a stark contrast to the warmth of the ballroom. The chatter and laughter from the party faded behind me as I stepped onto the balcony, my pulse thrumming in my ears. Helena stood near the railing, her back to me, looking out over the city skyline. The glow of the street lights below cast a soft shimmer over her silhouette, making the scene almost picturesque if I hadn't known better. And then there was Miles. He leaned against the railing, just a little too close to her, his body angled toward her in a way that wasn't friendly, wasn't professional. His posture was relaxed, confident, like a man who had already won the game before the other player even knew they were competing. I hesitated for a moment, gripping my glass so tightly my knuckles turned white. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe it was innocent. But then he reached out, a light touch, his fingers grazing her wrist, his thumb pressing briefly against the inside of her palm. Not an accident, not casual. A deliberate move. And Helena didn't pull away. She didn't step back, didn't recoil. She let it happen. Something inside me twisted so violently that, for a second, I couldn't breathe. For years, I had been the kind of man who believed in trust and patience and giving the benefit of the doubt. I had ignored the late nights at the office, the hushed phone calls, the way she had started turning away when I reached for her. I had told myself that marriage had its ups and downs, that we were just in a rough patch. But this wasn't a rough patch. This was a choice, and not mine. I took a slow step forward, clearing my throat. They both turned at the sound, Helena's eyes widening for a split second before she smoothed her expression into something neutral. Miles, on the other hand, barely reacted. If anything, he looked amused. "Warren," Helena said, her voice carefully controlled. "I didn't know you were out here. Liar." Miles just smiled, taking a sip from his drink like he was watching something mildly entertaining. "I needed some air," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm, to keep the crack of betrayal from slipping through. I gestured between them. "What about you two?" Helena tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous habit I had seen 1,000 times. Just talking. Just talking." The words hit me like a slap, not because of what she said but because of how easily she said it, how effortlessly she spun a lie, how little she seemed to care that I was standing right there watching it unfold. I turned to Miles. "Is that what we're calling it?" His smirk widened slightly, and I had the sudden violent urge to knock it right off his face. But I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. "Look," Helena said quickly, placing a hand on my arm. "Let's not do this here. Not at the party. Not at the party, not here." As if where I found out mattered more than what I had found out. I exhaled slowly, stepping back from her touch. "You're right," I said, my voice even. "This isn't the place." Helena visibly relaxed, but it was short-lived, because then I looked her dead in the eye and said, "But we will talk tonight." And then I walked away, leaving her standing there with her just a friend watching me go. But as I left, I caught something in Miles's expression. A flicker of something smug, something victorious, like he had already won. And that was the moment I decided he hadn't. Not yet. The drive home was silent, thick with unspoken words. Helena sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, her fingers nervously fidgeting with the hem of her dress. I kept my hands locked on the steering wheel, my jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might snap. My mind raced, replaying the scene over and over. The way she stood too close, the way she let Miles touch her, the way she lied so effortlessly to my face. The house felt different when we walked inside, like it wasn't really mine anymore. I had built this life with her, picked out the furniture, painted the walls, made it a place where we were supposed to grow old together. But now, standing in our living room, all I saw were the ghosts of a marriage I no longer recognized. Helena set her purse down on the counter and turned to face me, arms crossed. "All right," she said, her voice tight. "Let's just get this over with." I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Get this over with?" I repeated, shaking my head. "You act like this is some kind of inconvenience, like I'm the one causing a problem." She sighed, rubbing her temples like she had a headache. "Warren, nothing happened. You're blowing this way out of proportion." I took a slow step forward, leveling her with a look that I knew made her uncomfortable. "So that's what we're doing? We're pretending that what I saw tonight was nothing." Her expression hardened. "I was talking to a colleague, that's all." I could feel the anger creeping in now, tightening in my chest like a vice. "Talking? He touched you, Helena. You didn't pull away. You let him." My voice cracked on the last part, betraying the hurt beneath the anger. She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. "Are you sleeping with him?" I asked, the question falling from my lips before I could stop it. Her eyes widened, then narrowed into a glare. "How dare you?" she snapped, her voice laced with indignation. "You seriously think I would cheat on you?" I held her gaze, searching for something. Guilt, remorse, even a flicker of the woman I once knew. But all I saw was defensiveness. "I don't know what to think anymore," I admitted, my voice quieter now. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of the conversation hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Then she scoffed, shaking her head. "You know what? I don't have to stand here and be interrogated like some criminal." She turned on her heel and started toward the stairs. But something inside me snapped. "This is what you do, isn't it?" I said, my voice rising. "You twist things around, make me feel like I'm the one being unreasonable. Like I'm the bad guy for noticing that my wife is checked out of our marriage. She stopped, but didn't turn around. I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair. Just tell me the truth, Helena. Do you still love me? Silence. It stretched on for too long, each second another nail in the coffin of what we once had. And then finally she spoke. I don't know. I felt the breath leave my lungs. It wasn't an outright confession, but it was enough. Enough to tell me that she had already made up her mind, maybe not about Miles, maybe not even about cheating, but about us. She didn't know if she loved me anymore, and that hurt more than any affair ever could. I nodded slowly, swallowing past the lump in my throat. All right. She finally turned to face me, arms crossed again, her face unreadable. All right what? I looked around the house that was supposed to be ours, the life that was supposed to be ours. But I wasn't blind anymore. I'll make this easy for you, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. You don't have to figure out if you still love me. I'll decide for you. Her brows furrowed, confusion flickering across her face. I took a deep breath and said the words that felt like both an ending and a beginning. I'm leaving. Her eyes widened, and for the first time all night, I saw something real. Not guilt, not defiance, but fear. Maybe she thought I'd always be here, that no matter what she did, I'd never walk away. But she was wrong because the truth was I already had. I didn't sleep that night. I don't think Helena did either. She stayed upstairs in our bedroom while I sat downstairs on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. It was the kind of silence that settled between two people when there was nothing left to say. The next morning, the house felt emptier than usual. Maybe because I already knew I wasn't going to be here much longer. I moved through my usual routine on autopilot, showering, getting dressed, making coffee, except it all felt foreign now, like I was going through the motions of a life that no longer belonged to me. Helena came downstairs as I was pouring my coffee. She looked like she hadn't slept, her hair a little messier than usual, her eyes tired. But she didn't say anything. She just walked to the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and leaned against the counter, watching me. Finally, she spoke. So that's it. I didn't look at her. What do you mean? She let out a short, humorless laugh. You're just leaving? Just like that. I turned to face her, studying her expression. There was no anger there, no pleading, just confusion. Like she genuinely didn't understand how we had gotten here. And maybe that was the most heartbreaking part of all, because I had spent so much time trying to make this marriage work while she had spent so much time pretending nothing was wrong. I'm leaving because I don't think there's anything left to fight for, I said simply. And if I'm the only one who still cares, then what's the point? Her jaw tightened. That's not fair. I laughed. An exhausted, bitter laugh. Fair. I repeated. Helena, I asked you last night if you still loved me, and you said, I don't know. Do you realize how messed up that is? Do you know how much it took for me to even ask that question? She looked away, gripping the water bottle so tightly that her knuckles turned white. I sighed, running a hand over my face. Look, I'm not interested in fighting. I just want to move on with my life. You clearly already have. Her head snapped up at that. What's that supposed to mean? I scoffed. Do I really need to spell it out? Miles, the way you look at him, the way you let him touch you. If you haven't cheated already, you were damn close. Her face paled, but she didn't deny it. She didn't even try, and that told me everything I needed to know. I set my coffee down, suddenly not wanting it anymore. I'm quitting my job today, I said, my voice flat. I don't want to work at the same place as the man my wife emotionally checked out of our marriage for. Helena's eyes widened. You're quitting? Warren, that's... I don't care, I cut in. I'll figure something out. But I'm not going to be the guy who sticks around pretending everything is fine while his wife plays house with her colleague. She swallowed hard, like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. For a brief second, I wondered if she regretted any of this, if she ever looked at me and wished she had made a different choice. But then I reminded myself that none of that mattered anymore. I turned and walked toward the stairs. I'll pack some things and be gone by tonight. Warren, she said, her voice suddenly quiet, uncertain. I stopped at the base of the stairs, but I didn't turn around. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then she finally said, "Are you sure this is what you want?" I took a deep breath, exhaling slowly, letting the weight of everything settle. Then I said the most honest thing I had said in years. "No, but I know it's what I need." And then I walked upstairs, leaving behind the woman who had already left me long ago. Packing a suitcase for a life I hadn't planned to leave behind felt surreal. Every item I placed in the bag: shirts, a pair of running shoes, my laptop, a few personal documents, felt like a final nail in the coffin of the life I had built with Helena. The closet was still half full, my side untouched except for the small section I was emptying. It was like looking at a house that had burned down with a few untouched rooms remaining, reminders of what once was. Downstairs, I heard Helena moving around, opening and closing cabinets, probably pacing in the kitchen. I could almost imagine her, arms crossed, biting her lip, debating whether or not to come upstairs and try to stop me. But she wouldn't. I knew that now. She had already chosen her path, and I was no longer a part of it. I zipped up my bag, letting out a slow breath. My heart was heavy, but my mind was clear. This was the right decision. Staying meant slowly killing myself, watching her check out of our marriage more and more each day until there was nothing left but forced conversations and empty gestures. I had been a fool for ignoring the warning signs for so long. I grabbed my things and headed downstairs, pausing briefly in the doorway of the kitchen. Helena was sitting at the dining table, her fingers wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee she probably wasn't even drinking. She looked up when she saw me, her expression unreadable. "You're really doing this?" she said, more a statement than a question. "I have to," I replied simply. She inhaled sharply, then let out a slow breath. "And your job? You're seriously quitting?" I nodded. "I sent my resignation email this morning. I'll go in later to hand in my badge and clear out my desk." Her brows furrowed. "That's extreme, Warren. You don't have to throw everything away." I let out a small, bitter laugh. "I'm not the one who threw everything away, Helena." Her lips pressed together, and she looked away, staring at the table like it held the answers she didn't have. I didn't want to stand here and rehash the same conversation over and over. It wouldn't change anything. "I'll come back for the rest of my things later," I said, adjusting the strap of my bag over my shoulder. "I just need space right now." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Where are you going?" I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know. A hotel for now, maybe a rental after that. I'll figure it out." For the first time in years, I saw something in her eyes that resembled regret. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. I turned toward the door, gripping the handle, feeling the weight of everything pressing against me. "Warren," she said, her voice softer than before. I paused, but didn't look back. "I never meant to hurt you." I closed my eyes, swallowing down the lump in my throat. I could have said so many things. That she had hurt me, that she had been hurting me for a long time, long before Miles or that party. That love wasn't just about what you meant to do, it was about what you chose to do. But none of that mattered now. So instead, I simply said, "Goodbye, Helena." And then I walked out the door, leaving behind the woman who had stopped being my wife long before I had realized it. I didn't know what my next step was, but for the first time in a long time, I knew I was finally moving in the right direction. Leaving the house should have felt like a moment of liberation, but instead, it felt like walking away from a fire I had spent years trying to put out, only to realize that it had already burned down to ashes long before I accepted it. I didn't look back as I got into my car. I knew if I did, I might hesitate, I might question myself, and I couldn't afford that. Not now. The streets felt eerily empty as I drove away, the early morning light casting long shadows across the pavement. I had no destination in mind. I hadn't booked a hotel, hadn't called anyone for help. I just drove, letting the weight of what had just happened settle into my bones. I had walked out on my marriage, on my home, on my job, and yet somehow I felt lighter than I had in years. The truth was, I had been leaving for a long time. This was just the first time I actually had the guts to do it. The highway stretched ahead of me, an endless ribbon of asphalt leading nowhere in particular. I rolled down the window, letting the wind rush against my face, trying to clear my mind. I thought about Helena, about the way she had looked at me this morning, like she wasn't sure if she was supposed to feel guilty or relieved. I thought about all the times I had convinced myself that things would get better, that if I just worked harder, loved her more, things would fall back into place. But that was the lie I had been telling myself for years. The truth was, love didn't just disappear overnight. It faded slowly, piece by piece, until one day you woke up and realized it was gone. And maybe she had realized it before I did. Maybe that was why she had stopped trying. I passed a sign for a roadside diner and on impulse, pulled into the parking lot. My stomach was in knots, but I hadn't eaten since the party, and I needed something to anchor myself, something normal. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside. The place was nearly empty, save for a waitress behind the counter and an older man nursing a cup of coffee in the corner booth. I slid into a seat near the window, staring out at the highway, wondering how many other people had driven away from their old lives today. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a kind smile, walked over and poured me a cup of coffee before I even asked. "You look like a man who could use something strong," she said. I let out a small, dry chuckle. "You have no idea." She gave me a knowing look. "Heartbreak or job trouble?" I hesitated, then shook my head. "Both." She nodded like she had heard the story 100 times before. "Well, let me tell you something, honey. You'll survive both." I wanted to believe her. I sipped my coffee, letting the warmth spread through me, trying to convince myself that she was right, that this wasn't the end of my life. It was just the end of this chapter. But as I sat there, staring down at my reflection in the dark surface of my coffee, I realized something else. I wasn't just mourning my marriage. I was mourning the man I used to be, and I wasn't sure who I was without him. I sat in that diner for a long time, letting the coffee go cold in my hands as I tried to process everything. The weight of what I had lost still lingered, but somewhere underneath it, something new was taking shape, a quiet realization. I wasn't broken. I was free. For years, I had been carrying the weight of a marriage that was falling apart, convincing myself that if I just held on tighter, if I just fought harder, I could fix it. But love isn't something you fight to keep. It's something that grows naturally, something that thrives when both people choose to nurture it. And Helena had stopped choosing me a long time ago. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was accepting that I had been alone in this relationship for longer than I realized. But now, sitting in a quiet diner with nowhere to be and no one to answer to, I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts, and hesitated for a moment before dialing a number I hadn't called in months. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Warren, man, it's been a while." I smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. "Yeah, it has. Noah, listen, are you still looking for someone to help with that startup project?" There was a pause, then a chuckle. "Hell yeah, I am. You finally ready to get out of that corporate grind?" I exhaled, glancing out the window at the endless stretch of road ahead of me. "Yeah, I think I am." We talked for a while, and by the time I hung up, I had something I hadn't had in a long time. A plan. A real one. I wasn't just walking away from something. I was walking towards something. A new career. A new life. A version of myself that wasn't defined by my past mistakes or the love I had lost. I paid for my coffee, leaving a generous tip, and stepped outside, breathing in the crisp morning air. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in streaks of gold and orange. A new day. A new beginning. I got into my car, started the engine, and instead of looking back, I drove forward. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to hold on to something that wasn't meant for me. I was ready for whatever came next, and for the first time in a long time I was excited.